None of us know what's going to happen today when we wake up in the morning, whether we're going to lose our best customer, whether we're going to meet our next best customer, whether we're going to lose a partner, lose a friend. It's crisis and it's around the corner. It hits all of us. What do you do when it strikes? From crisis to clarity. We're talking about that next. Rod Neuenschwander is our guest on Purpose Under Pressure. Well, the heat is on. Let's get cooking. This is Purpose Under Pressure. It's a show all about people like you and me. We just are trying our best. We wake up in the morning, we swing our feet out of bed, we put them on the floor, we get after it. But boy, those pressures do want to come and knock us off, don't they? And tell us a different way or an easier way or a shortcut to where we're trying to go. And are we going to stay on purpose or are we going to fall off? And that's what this show is all about. Thanks for coming back. This is the 9th season of our program, and I'm glad you're here. If you have watched our show or engaged with it in some way, if you like it at all, please let other people know. Could you like it or subscribe or push some kind of button? Tell your mom, whatever it takes to let other people know that this show is worth looking at and watching. Why I do this is so that other people will have an opportunity to understand that there's others under pressure too, and that if you just keep going, you can get through it. And unless other people know about it, what are we doing? So go ahead and like that. I appreciate you doing so. Purpose Under Pressure is brought to you by Sandler, by the Ruby Group, serving sales professionals nationwide from their Akron, Columbus, Ohio locations. They are also in Jacksonville, Florida. They are also in upstate capital region, New York. They are sales training, revenue generation, but I'm telling you right now, they're not tricks. They're not gimmicks. They're not false. They're not players. They are on purpose. And if you own a business that thrives on revenue, thrives on relationships, how to get your word across, how to close sales in a way that builds everybody up in a win-win way. That is the Sandler method, and no one does it better than the Ruby Group. So you can check them out online at therubygroup.sandler.com. Our guest today is Rod Neuenschwander, and he is the co-founder and president of Giftology and Ruling Group. He's also the author of From Crisis to Clarity. Crisis to Clarity. When I saw that book, I'm like, holy cow, that is Purpose Under Pressure. And so I reached out, and Rod and I have got to know each other just a little bit, and I'm excited for you to get to know him too. Rod, welcome to Purpose Under Pressure.
Thank you, Brian. Look forward to being here.
I'm really glad you're here. And I explained to you a little bit about what the show is all about and how we try to reach out to others when they're under pressure to let them know to keep on going. And I think that's what you do. Rod, can you tell people a little bit about Giftology, a little bit about the past and history of Ruling Group and the book, and give a setup of what your companies have gone through here recently?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brian. Giftology is a well-known brand. People follow us and read John's writings. And we started off though well before people started to recognize us. So 10 years prior to that, in fact, 18 years ago, John and I joined forces, and through uh, that growth, the thing that I was telling you, Brian, was we actually started two companies in the way, and it's funny how God works in mysterious ways because so when we started off, John was brilliant at building relationships and networks, and when we decided to join forces, he said, "Hey, you know what? I think the wheels are falling off," and the turns out it was true. So what ended up happening is we sort of focused the company, but along that journey, our lawyer approached us and said, "Hey, would you be willing to work with one of my clients?" Because he knew that I did turnarounds in a prior life. And so what ended up happening was John and I talked it over. And what do entrepreneurs do when they're early in their game? They say yes to everything. So we did.
Yeah.
So that what that ultimately led to through that process, we eventually developed a separate company called Rulin Partners Group, where we partner with founders of companies that are in crisis. And so what we did is we partnered with founders, helped them turn around and lead to a wealth creating event was our goal. So as we built Giftology, we helped turn around and sell five other companies in that same time frame, creating wealth generation for them. Wasn't bad for us either. And but then you fast forward now, 15 plus years later, and with John's passing last a year ago, last August, we kind of fell in that same boat. You never think you're going to do. I never believed I would do a turnaround effort for my own company. That's what we ended up doing. And so the book
Hmm.
that I wrote called Crisis to Clarity is about that story. It's like a kind of considered like a real time case study for people that find themselves in crisis. And we're using our current giftology situation as that primary case study throughout, plus weaving in 20 years of history working with other companies. But it provides a framework for founders of how to think through and how to actually operate through a crisis. And so um, I wrote that this and launched it last month actually. But I did that for two reasons. One was personal and one was pragmatic. The personal reason is I promised John that I would.
Hmm.
I just never did it. He's always like, you should talk about how you turn companies around. Never, I feel like, yeah, like I will someday, and I just never did it. And the second reason was I found early on that, what I provided was the operating uh, chops and helping build and scale giftology. But the gifting was John's superpower. Connecting with in relationships with John's superpower, we developed a team to support that. And so when I realized that I could use that, and so when I was asked to help or to participate in some podcast articles early on after John passed, I realized, wow, I'm gonna have to rethink how I approach this because they want to talk about like those service offerings, and Sarah on our team actually handles all the front end lead flow for our new book and everything else from
Mm-hmm.
Beyond Giftology that's out there. And so I realized, you know what, I had an idea of what if I wrote about our situation in the same time and allow me to fulfill a promise made to John and provide a framework for founders of how to turn around in a crisis.
So the book is about businesses and about specifically your business and how it went through crisis and how it's transformed and in order to help others that are doing the same.
Yep.
I'm interested though, how has this always been? It sounds like this has always been your thing, building businesses from kind of the ashes a little bit. Has that always been the case and you're just now stepping into it fully? Or is this just always what you've done?
Well, it's kind of funny. Um, it's kind of like we kind of backed into it by accident. And so the backstory is like 20 years ago when John and I, we had one of those lunches where we're 24 at the time, I think.
I
Where
love those lunches. I
yeah, we
love
left.
those lunches.
It was the first time we met at a Christian concert for these mutual friends, and we had lunch, and like that 2 hour lunch, we left thinking we should buy companies together. So with that, and then with the first company we wanted to buy, we actually tried it, and then so the first company we wanted to buy, we realized the numbers weren't right, and so I was working as a consulting firm at that point. So then I agreed to come in to operate that as president, and that was my first turnaround. And then after that, we didn't end up buying that company. It went to a much larger turnaround. So there's about a 4 year time frame between that first launch, John and I, and then 4 years later, John and I continued to say we want to work together. And so after that last turnaround effort as like a hired gun president or COO, John's like, why don't we just merge forces? I feel like that's when he said, I feel like the wheels are falling off. And so what happens is like John and I, we always had the philosophy, like we're going to operate in obedience to what we feel God's calling us to do and, and use our strengths in ways and just sort of materialize that way. I would love to say that we had so much forethought that we said, we're going to build two brands and like, it
Right.
just wasn't that way. It was more of like, it just sort of, hey, we're going to be obedient to this, and it just sort of happened. And then next thing you know, 18 years later, here we are.
So in your situation, crisis, and I'm
Yeah,
paraphrasing here, I'm putting words in your mouth. Crisis
yeah,
happened when John passed away. In
yeah,
many businesses, you're in crisis. I think probably in most businesses, you might be in crisis before you even know it. By the time you think you're in
yeah,
crisis, it's way too late. Can you tell me a little bit about your story? And then I want
yeah.
to talk about how this can, how another business owner can see it and put it to use in theirs as well. Tell me about though what happened with you when John passed away and how you were able to turn crisis into
Yeah.
clarity for your company.
Well, I mean, I'll start because in the book I define crisis in four different ways. To your point,
Okay.
and I would argue that most small businesses, called $25 million or under, are in some version of crisis or will be. And in fact, I think most companies are like three decision points away from being at a crisis point. And so, um, at least that's what I've experienced. And so I
Mm-hmm.
define it in four ways. The first one is called the fire. That's obvious. Everybody knows it. It's like losing your closest friend and business partner of 18 years, and he's your 70% of our most profitable revenue, right? Second one I call it the slow leak. This is where it's like kind of unaddressed problems, or you can call it like slow unaddressed erosion, where you know the problems exist, they're just not urgent enough for you to address them until they are, right?
Yeah, right.
The uh, the third I call the broken mirror, and this is like leadership challenges where maybe the company outgrew the natural skill sets of the founder, or maybe the founder just doesn't listen. like
It
that's
happens.
these are sometimes some of the most difficult ones to solve because a leader has to be very humble in order to address it. And then the fourth one I just call the hamster wheel. This is sort of like chronic
Mm.
underperformance. Like a lot of the companies we end up partnering with the founders on, they were in business for 20 years. They were just sort of
Mhm.
like existing, and but the same framework that we walked through is fairly consistent. And so what I try to do, so the framework is the same regardless of the crisis, and I'll use our situation, to give context to that. So for the framework would include a clear purpose statement, go forward operating plan, go forward financial plan, and go forward team plan,
Mhm.
all done in a one page. So I call it the one page recovery plan. And the goal is that you have to simplify everything into one page because that you don't have energy and time and to
Yeah,
not
you're in
focus.
crisis. Yeah.
You're in crisis. So
You can't
the
just
thing
do a
is
lot of things. You've got to do one
simplify
thing, move
everything down,
forward.
right? And it's not just shrinking the font either. This is like no, it's like legit. So I time it out like for your operating plan, it's sort of like your core element of what is happening, right? So for that, you're talking 3 to 5 things. You go forward financial plan, 2 to 4, go forward team plan, 2 to 4 priorities. And these are
Hmm.
things that you as a leader are going to focus your organization on. And so it forces you to like really think through what does your organization have to become. But I start with a clear purpose statement because you have to align your company. So for us, our clear purpose statement is for Giftology is we help leaders love on relationships because everything rises and falls on relationships. And why do we believe that? Because we believe relationships take you where marketing can't.
Hmm.
So that's the clear purpose statement for Giftology. Now,
Mhm.
for the go forward operating plan, um, so prior to John passing, we were actually working on what the next thing was going to be for Giftology. We just didn't want the next book to be another Giftology book. And so we spent years focusing on like what it is that we really want to tackle. And it really became like helping understand that relationships really are your number one growth strategy. But how do you practically do that from a leader of teams? Right? So people would say like referrals are my best lead source, but there's no like way to operationalize that. It's just sort of like haphazard and leave it to chance. So we were
Yeah.
going to tackle that issue with our next book. And so we had started with some programmatic things that were being worked on and tested, and we're getting some good results. And these services were actually called John Not Needed, which is painful to think about at the time. But Mike on our team, who drives all our content, and Sarah took lead on all these programs. So there was a foundation already established. So when John passed away, um, what uh, what I had to do is within 72 hours of him passing away, we just set a framework for using the one page plan of like what does our go forward methodology look like. We leaned heavily on those elements that we knew we were building out and we're going to be leaning towards, and so we accelerated those timelines. So if our go forward operating plan, it became, hey, we need to replace John's consulting and speaking revenue with 600 memberships in our new training platform, right? And
Okay.
so, but we had to finish building it. So we accelerated 3 years worth of planning into 1 year of execution, and our team was able to recalibrate Giftology over the last year in 1 year, which is astonishing, right?
Wow.
And that would have been the operating plan of what I'm talking about, of like how we focus the organization.
And that wouldn't have happened. I'm thinking back to COVID a little bit right now
Yeah,
because COVID happened and everybody had to reset and reschedule, and that's a crisis. That's the huge
yeah,
crisis for business. So much new happened at that time that wouldn't have happened along the line. It was 10-year plans that were put into 6 months, right?
right.
How do you know when you're in crisis whether what you should do is keep plowing forward with a new plan to get there or to blow the whole thing up and change because you lost the purpose ish behind giftology, and yet that's your brand? How do you know okay, giftology is done. Let's do something else. How do you
Well,
stick to that purpose even under that pressure?
yeah, well, that's a great question. I mean, I don't, we have a really good team that's been with us for a very long time. And so the execution of what we offer to our clients and how we help them make relationships their number one growth strategy, the core elements of those exist. What we lost
Yeah.
is our key mouthpiece and our key person that sort of led that charge and what he's known for. But I didn't feel like we were uh, losing our future through it. I
Mm,
felt like there's a way for we can actually transform. And in fact, our company, we feel like we're honoring John's legacy by actually expanding um,
I bet.
the brand in ways that um, we couldn't have imagined just prior to him. So our team was able to sort of recalibrate that focus and sort of reorient of how we interface with the market, but we do it very, very effectively. And I would argue, like, and I say this in the book, but sometimes crisis creates possibilities that comfort never could, right? So if you think back to
Mm,
like our the giftology itself was actually a result of a crisis. So when John and I merged forces 18 years ago, those first couple of years were pretty tough, and so he was like, "Hey, I think the wheels are falling off," and it wasn't because he was unbelievably talented, like world class talent, ability to
yeah.
connect with people, and so, but what we, but he was kind of all over the place, and so what we realized through that process is that it wasn't an industry that we served so much. It was more of like a mindset of a person, like people that understood that relationships mattered in their world. It became like those were our best clients. And we served all these different industries, but we realized our best accounts were people that understood the power of relationships in their world. So we're like, how do we just reach those people? And then
Mm,
we said, well, where do relationship oriented people gather? And so that's what led John to begin speaking on stage in the first place. Was 18, 15 years ago now, over or where he started just doing stages, and it turns out he's world class good, right? And
yeah.
so
Oh
that
yeah.
eventually led to the writing of giftology. And so that was an opportunity to crisis. Right now, we're in a situation where without John here, we're leaning heavily on our team that's unbelievably talented. And so what I would in our go forward team plan, and I would, and some of this is like, why did it take a crisis for us to reveal how talented this
Mm,
team is? And so people have stepped up in ways that are just unbelievable, and I'm truly in awe of their just natural abilities to lead. And so we have actually, in many ways, I feel the future of giftology is actually enhanced through all this, and we're doing it in a way that's going to honor John and John's legacy, and his girls are going to see the impact that his life had on so many people that he will never have met through the team that we're um, now working through.
and is that why the book is called Clarity? I mean, you could go from crisis to a lot of things. You can success or winning or whatever it might be. You chose clarity. Clarity doesn't always make a lot of money. Clarity
Yeah.
might not sell a lot of stock. Clarity is though is what you found. And is that what you typically find when people go through crisis that way?
Looking at the typical salesperson, everything they do day in and day out, if we simplify all of that and really boil it down, they have two superpowers. First superpower that salespeople have is how they behave. Second superpower they have is what they say. As a seller, we only have two problems. We either said something or did something that we should not have said or done, or we didn't say something or do something that we should have said or done.
Clarity is though is what you found. And is that what you typically find when people go through crisis that way?
I think you don't have a starting point if you don't have clarity. So that's why the one page plan is so critical. So
Ah,
like you have to like sort of reorient your thinking of like what is it that's going to get me through this crisis. And so for me, it's simplification. Like you have to simplify down to the most critical and highest priorities. And that starts with like what your purpose is. That's why I start with a clear purpose statement. It's like this is who we're going to be. Now, the deliverables of how we actually fulfill that promise, they can change, but this is what we do, and this is who we serve. And so we started there, and then sort of you transition through that. Now, but for me personally, and even with all the different, because I was also a board chair of a university that was in a tough spot too, but it's kind of the same principle for me. Is like the way I operate is like when I have clarity. So I sort of in the book I talk about it, but like a clear mind and a calm spirit. Those are the things that I pray for, because what I've experienced in my life is that wisdom is demonstrated when my mind is clear and my spirit is calm. If I don't have clarity, then I need to keep working, right? There's something that's not there yet. But there's just an amazingness that happens when you start like really focusing in on the tool that I use, the one-page recovery plan. When you start focusing in on the clarity that's provided through that whole process, just calms your spirit. If not, then you're going to be like, you're going to constantly in a state of trying to like tackle all these other things, where it's like, for us, it was like, no, this is what we're going to do. Do we have to continue to sell stuff? 100%. Like, we can't just stop everything and do this. But our transition success is going to be contingent upon the fact of, can we deliver on this training platform? And that's where our resources and energy was delivered towards.
And so tell me a little bit about that. So you went through the process. You came up with the clarity. You had the whole team in on board. Sometimes when you're looking at the forest and you see the tree, you focus on the wrong tree. And
Yep.
how do you know? And did you have some false starts or some didn't realize that, where it actually even through the process gained more clarity, or does your process simply line it all right up from the
No,
get go?
no, it doesn't. And in fact, that's a really good question. You're the first person to actually ask that question, and that's astounding to me. What the goal of a one-page plan is: direction and guardrails.
Yeah.
Direction and
Okay.
guardrails. Because then what happens is, so I have three simple rules. Like when you're doing these plans, simplify relentlessly, know who you are, right? So I will never be John Ruhlin, but I don't have to be for Giftology to be successful. And organizationally, like we just have to know who we are. But to your point, my third principle is like, you have to move fast with the plan. So the one-page plan provides the direction and the guardrails. Did I know everything about what it's going to take to make Mission 600 possible? It became like our theme, Mission 600. No idea. But I did
Mm.
know that we had to start the process, and the only way you're going to learn is by action. And so, and I keep telling our team, is like, we shoot a lot of bullets before we load cannons. Like that's a principle from Good to Great. It's a very good principle.
Mhm.
But like, moving fast is the only way we're going to learn. And so, like, and I keep promising, like, hey, listen, like, we're going to be moving in this direction. Do I know exactly what it looks like? No, 100%. But like, every thing that we do adds to our knowledge along the way and becomes more and more clear. And so that's how we condensed 3 years worth of planning into 1 year of execution, is simply because we provided the direction and the guardrails and allowed our team to operate. But we do that a lot. Like, historically, we're not micromanagers. Like John and I, we trust our team. We hire good people. We trust them. We provide guardrails. Like, I keep telling our team, hey, you're never going to make a decision that's going to tank the company. That's my job. like, like, if I make a decision and that's my fault, right? Like,
Yep.
you don't fear making decisions. In fact, we're going to provide the guardrails, but go. Like, I want you to make decisions, and the more errors you make along the way, the faster we learn. And so that's kind of how we got to where we are.
You're fortunate. You and John built a great company. We talked about this a little bit before the show, and it's hard to lose what you've already built. And I think there's many companies that don't even realize that there's another step greater than even what they have. I'll bring this to what I'm trying to get to. You've got a great team. You've talked about it at least 10 times already. You've given your team all of the credit for everything that you're doing. Not everyone does. Not every business has a great culture. Not every, you talked about different leaders and having to be humble. Not everyone has that. There's people listening right now going, oh, my team will never be able to do that. Or they don't even realize they're in crisis to begin with. What
Mm-hmm.
does a business do? How have you seen businesses overcome some of those hurdles in order to accomplish what they need to accomplish, and kind of add that clarity to the crisis when they don't have some of the building blocks that you're fortunate enough to have built already?
Um, First thing I would say is, crisis is not the time to build culture. So you're going to be in a tough spot. And so my recommendation is like, if you don't believe you're in crisis today, then I would ask yourself, is my culture willing? Can my company take a punch? Is my culture, um, uh, do I have the culture I want? And if the answer to those questions are no, then you're in crisis, because
Mm-hmm.
you're one big, um,
It's coming.
client. I mean, we can't control all things. Like we a lot of our turnaround companies that we end up selling were tech companies, and so, I mean, in that space, we can't control clients being sold and bought. We can't control
Mm-hmm.
clients going out of business, and so, like, all of those things happen, and so the like you just have to be calibrated in a way that you're able to adjust it quickly. And for us, the only way I can do that is you have to have a culture that allows for some independent thinking and some and allow your team to work within those parameters and those guardrails. So otherwise, like, I think it's going to be really, really difficult to manage through crisis. So I would work on it now. So I would say the takeaway for me would be, it's like, hey, we're closing in the end of the year. Think about next year. What do I want my
Mm-hmm.
year company to look like in the next year? Formulate a. I always tell, like, just because the frameworks for crisis doesn't mean it doesn't work in other times too. It's like, focus on the highest priorities. And so if you have a team that's not doesn't have the culture you want, you have a year to fix it. Spend the
You
year
have
to
to
fix
figure
it.
that out. And that can be your crisis. Even if you don't feel the crisis at this moment, that can be your crisis. And does it
Yeah.
make sense? I guess it does make sense that we should always be looking over our shoulder, one or two more decisions, and prepping for that. As good business owners, we
Yeah.
have to do that. I'm interested a little bit. You talked about John, and referrals and relationships, and I imagine a lot of people wanted to work with you, or how do you decide? Anybody can read your book, but how do
Mhm.
you decide whether you can help them or not? What level of crisis do they need to be in before you kind of jump in and try to, quote unquote,
So,
save the day?
well, our model, so we only help directly with companies that meet a couple criteria for us. One is, um, they have to be in the right industry. So,
Okay.
we have to be. So how we don't consult, we only partner. So it's like, we're gonna do the turnaround effort, but we will take a portion of your company to do so. Um,
Okay.
and then we get paid when we all collectively win, right? And so, so they have to be in the right. So that sort of, like, they have to be willing to be able to want to sell within, hopefully target of 4 years. Secondly, they have to be in an industry that I know the private equity work wants to buy, because it's the easiest way to sell this when it's already a known space that equity wants to buy. So that we cherry pick those a little bit, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
and then, like, do we trust the leader?
I,
And so, if you don't trust the leader, because, like, and a lot of times the companies we're working with are in really bad shape, so they quickly trust me in
they
that
have to.
process. They
Mm-hmm.
have to, but
Mm-hmm.
I have to be able to trust them too.
I love your purpose here, because that's why you wrote the book, isn't it? I'm starting to figure this out a little bit, Rod. That you wrote the book so that people like me, you'll never own my company, but so
Mm-hmm.
that I'll understand that there is crisis over my shoulder. It is coming. I do need to have this plan in place, and I do need clarity so that we can benefit from the things that you've built there for others, even though you'll never make a dime from
No,
me other than if I buy the book, right? I mean, that's the purpose here, isn't it?
it is. It is. It's
Tremendous.
100%, and it's allowing me to fulfill a commitment I made to John. So,
I love that. I
um,
love that. And I know he loves it too. And I think it matters. I think everything, I think you believe this too. I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think everything happens for reasons as much as we hate them. And every reason is important, and it matters to the person that went through it. It matters to John. He knows what you're doing, and it's all connected. That's a different show perhaps at some
yeah,
point. But I like
yeah.
to end this show sometimes about looking at the future, and I'm interested in Ruling Group. I'm interested in Crisis to Clarity. What are the hurdles? What are the pressures? What are the things that you are now clear about that you're going to have to work double time or figure out a smart way around, that are going to kind of try to knock you off your pace moving forward?
Yeah. So we'll start with mythology. So let me step back for a second. When John and I, our next 10 years, our goal was, so we helped create roughly $30 million of wealth creating events for founders from companies that were in crisis. At the same time, we built Giftology. So our plan for the next 10 years was like, maybe we could help $100 million, help generate $100 million worth of wealth with companies that are in crisis. At the same time, expand Giftology's reach by tenfold, right? And so that was our next year plan. When John passed, I didn't feel like either one of those goals were still not possible, right? And so, but it's good. It just looks different. And so we firmly believe that, we're not, for Giftology, we're not just preserving what was, like, we're going to transform into what we can become. And so that's happening. In order to make that happen, the go forward financial plan from that is that I realized that through this, in my book, I talk about a founder's math hack. It's like a really simplified financial model that I can make like really fast decisions with. I realized quickly that the company could stay profitable if I could unencumber John and I's income requirements from the company. So our financial goal was Lindsay and I, John's spouse, unencumbering Giftology, our income from Giftology for at least 2 years. That would give our team the. That's not fun. So
that's some pressure. Yeah.
There's some hurdles along the way for us, but I also know that that's going to be best because that allows us to team our team and to make that work. So in the short term, the speed at which we can get Giftology to where we want to go. But I see some like really amazing things that we can do and serve the market and that are requiring additional investment. So originally I thought that was only going to be 2 years. Well, now I think there's going to make sense for us to continue investment because there's some tech that we're building to support what we're doing within the Giftology ecosystem. So what I'm going to be focusing on, because we have a really good team that's running Giftology. I provide the leadership and the guidance. And so what I'm gonna sort of double down again on some new partnerships and help generate income outside of Giftology through our other company to help offset some of that stuff that Lindsay and I can. So you ask about hurdles. That's where my energies are focusing on. Like I want to be able to do that successfully because I would love to not have to pull money from Giftology so we can reinvest for our team's future.
And that clarity that you've been able to come up with has outlined that, and you can see that very clearly. And I think that's amazing. I want to wrap up. I want you to let people know how to get a hold of the book, but I want you to do so in such a way as to help people understand the need to read it. And what I mean by that is, if there's a business owner out there listening, going, "Yeah, that sounds good," and Rod said a few cool one-liners, and that sounds great. I can read that in any book. I'm interested in, as a business owner, what should I be looking for? What should I kind of notice on my way home from work, or things I'm thinking that might trigger this idea of crisis? Because I likely can't see it. And why should I buy your book? And then where can I find it?
Yeah, I would argue that they already know. They're just not getting it. So they're driving home, and they're like, if they're staying awake at night, then there's stuff that they need to deal with now. And honestly, managing companies is not easy. Like there's stress. There's thing. What I think my book offers is the editors and publishers were very gave good advice. Say, hey, people that are going to be picking up your book are not going to want to read like 400 pages. So we made this a very condensed. I mean, this is you can read this book in 3 hours, and we did it in a way that we provide real-time examples. So our entire Giftology recovery plan is in the book. Now, I believe the framework is helpful. So for anybody, so if they're driving home today and they're stressed about something, like right, then the book can offer them some support.
It can offer them some help. Tremendous.
And so the website they can go to is businessonthebrink.com.
Okay.
Is that if they need help and they're like thinking to themselves, hey, I would love to make relationships my number one growth strategy. And how do you actually do that in an operational way? right? And how do you actually operationalize that activity so we can actually enhance human-human connection and not replace it with some AI? That is what giftology is all about. And I would suggest you go to giftologygroup.com for that. For my book, you can also go to amazon.com and buy my book there too.
Tremendous. And I'm so glad that you wrote it. And I love the fact that it's not a lead gen. It's not, project. It's not a lead funnel. It's not just trying to get your phone to ring, or it's a real book from your heart that you and your partner, John, were going to do. And you did it. And I think that's amazing. I want to thank you for spending the time with us. I know you've got a lot on your plate, but I can tell that your purpose is to help others do the things that you're doing, and so that this expense of your time is on purpose for you too. And so Rod, thank you very much for being our guest on Purpose Under Pressure.
Hey, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. Thank you.
That's Rod Neuenschwander. He is the co-founder and president of Giftology, the ruling group, and the author of From Crisis to Clarity. And that's a book that I think you ought to read. It speaks to me. Purpose Under Pressure. I believe that we have purpose and that we're just constantly being barraged by pressure, and in Rod's term, crisis. It's not always the death of a partner or a best friend. It can be anything that's just gnawing at something that's going to cause a problem in the future. So do that. And while you're at it, to give a little bit of love to our sponsors of Purpose Under Pressure, it's Sandler by the Ruby Group. They are our sponsors here, our partners here. They're helping me build this thing, and I think that's so cool. So if you have a chance, check them out at therubygroup.sandler.com. This is Purpose Under Pressure. We do it every week, and we will see you next time on Purpose.